NFL fans, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Around. I am your host, Jeff Hartman, and joining me as always is Coach K.T. Smith. Coach, what's going on? How are you?
Doing great, Jeff. Another exciting week in the books, and what happened last week? Last week the unbeatens fell away, and this year this week the winless have now been wiped clean, so that we got everybody's won a game.
Yes, and that's a good thing, I think. And I asked Rob Stats Guerrero on our Monday show, does he do the Cleveland Browns and the Detroit Lions pop champagne like the 72 Dolphins do when a team finally wins a game? Probably not. But I titled this for this podcast for this reason, like how little we know after week 8. Right when you think you have things figured out in the NFL, right when you think you've got a good beat on these teams, what's the first talking point tonight? It's the 49ers, the San Francisco 49ers. They look like a juggernaut. They look like no one could come close to touching them. Now, all of a sudden, they limp into their bye week after losing, was it 3? Is it 3 in a row or 2 in a row? I've lost track.
Yeah, it's 2 in a row, but 3 out of 4, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really rough stretch for them. What is wrong, in your opinion, Coach, with the San Francisco 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question because just on our show last week, we were saying we think that there's only a couple of elite teams. We named San Francisco, Kansas City, and Philly as what we thought that were the 3 elite teams. Well, 2 of them lost on Sunday. And as far as the 49ers go, I mean, obviously the injuries have been an issue for them. They were playing for a little bit without Christian McCaffrey, and Deebo Samuel is still dinged up. I think the biggest problem that they have right now is that teams' defenses are challenging Brock Purdy to answer against the blitz, and he's really struggling to do it. That's an issue that befuddles a lot of young quarterbacks is how do you handle the blitz? And when San Francisco's got all their weapons there, they've got some built-in solutions for their young quarterbacks. They've got the ability to throw hot or get guys in space, and you're a little hesitant to come after Purdy, or at least teams have been, because of the embarrassment of riches the Niners have at the skill positions. But with some of those guys banged up, I think teams have found a formula. And I think the most telling thing about Purdy is you watch his eyes. Like when you get those good camera angles, when they zoom in pre-snap, his eyes are all over the place. He doesn't know exactly what he's looking at. He doesn't know where stuff is coming from. And that's a bad sign for a young quarterback. Indecision will get you killed in the NFL.
So go back to the very first loss for the San Francisco 49ers at Cleveland. Really weird ending to the game when you talk about some questionable calls, missed field goal by Jake Moody. But nonetheless, I said, Coach, is this a blueprint for the rest of the league on how to beat the 49ers? And you were like, well, Jim Schwartz is good. And you gave the very political answer. And I get that. You're toeing the company line. I get it. But now that we've seen what we've seen following that game, is there a blueprint out there now?
I think for the moment, until Brock Purdy proves that he can solve these pressure schemes, and I haven't been able to really take a deep dive on what exactly teams are doing. How are they confusing him with blitzes combined with coverage disguise? Are they just trying to heat him up immediately at the snap? I'm not sure exactly what the strategy has been. But that's the thing in the NFL is like you got to prove you can stop a thing or beat a thing, or in the copycat league that it is, everybody will do it to you. And the challenge now going forward for them will be to figure out answers. And this is a great time for their bye because it gives them time to work on that. It's funny. It wasn't that long ago. It seems like just like literally like weeks ago when it felt like the 49ers were just so loaded at the quarterback position that they didn't even know what to do with all their guys. They had Jimmy Garoppolo, they had Trey Lance, they had Purdy, and they unloaded 2 of those guys. And now the third one seems to be raising some questions about, is he a franchise quarterback or is he the guy who was taken last in the draft? And fascinating dilemma the 49ers have right now.
Yeah, and talk about teams, a narrative surrounding a team that has changed dramatically in the last 3 weeks, which is the next talking point here on the whip around, which is which team has done the most to change the narrative about their season the past few weeks. We could go in a bunch of different directions with this. I think this is a really difficult question to answer. When you think about, you already mentioned it, Kansas City falls flat on their face in Denver. No one saw that coming. They haven't lost to the Broncos since 2015. and yet they lose that game. You talk about Miami. They win in week 8, but what is the narrative surrounding Miami? They beat crappy teams or mediocre to bad teams, but they struggle against the really good teams. I don't know, Coach. Where do you lean when you think about a team that's done the most to change their narrative?
Yeah, you first of all, you brought up that statistic about the Chiefs and the Broncos. How do you sweep a team in your division for like 7 seasons in a row? That is remarkable. I didn't know that was a stat until I read it earlier today. That's
Yeah.
remarkable.
Peyton Manning was the quarterback the last time the Broncos beat the Chiefs.
That's amazing because Denver
Yeah.
hasn't been terrible in all that time,
No.
which makes it even more amazing. But so Denver is a candidate here. It wasn't that long ago when they were the laughing stock of the league after giving up 70 points to the Dolphins, and everybody said, "Oh, it's a train wreck," and they're going to start. They're going to fire their DC, and yet they've managed really kind of by taking the ball away from Russell Wilson and leaning in hard on their run game to cobble together a couple of pretty good wins. But the team that I'll go with here is the Jets. I think that the Jets that Robert Saleh and his staff have done a remarkable job to get that team to 4-3. Aaron Rodgers, 4 plays into the season, tears the Achilles. Zach Wilson's got to come in. He looks horrendous. And everybody right there says the Jets are done. And Jets fans, are punching themselves in the face for like the 50th season in a row. And yet now they're 4-3 and they're back in the playoff hunt. And it feels as though like that division is a little bit more vulnerable than it seemed. Buffalo has not been as good as everybody thought. And you mentioned the narrative on Miami. So the Jets are right back in the middle of it all. And that's a remarkable job, really, by the head coach there to get his guys to continue to believe when everybody wrote them off as being dead. What do you think?
Choice. It's a good choice. I'm going to go with the team that I've actually been very critical of on this show the past few weeks, and that's the Philadelphia Eagles. They had the hiccup and they lost to the Jets, and that was a bad loss. And I'm sure that woke up a lot of people in terms of inside that organization. But while all these other teams are losing these games, Buffalo's losing these weird games. They're finding ways to lose. Kansas City loses to Denver. San Francisco's losing games. It's the Philadelphia Eagles that have probably been the most consistent team in the league. They've only lost that one game. They're finding ways to win tough divisional games. A.J. Brown is a stud of studs. Like, that guy is unbelievable. I'm going to say that the narrative that I had around Philadelphia was, I don't know if I'm bought into them yet based on the changing of the coordinators because they got new jobs elsewhere, based on the turnover on the roster. And they're making their roster better when they traded for Byard, the safety out of Tennessee. They unload Terrell Edmonds, Steeler fans know well, and they improved their secondary. And I'm sure they're going to be buyers again before the deadline today at 4:00. So, Coach, that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with Philadelphia. And this is more personal for me because I was one that questioned the Philadelphia Eagles. And to me, they've answered the bell. And so in terms of changing my narrative, I'm going to go with Philly because I thought that was a really big win for them. Washington, although they put up some points, they find a way to win.
Yeah, the Eagles are doing a great job of compensating for some of their weaknesses. The coordinators have been an issue to a degree. I won't say an issue, but there's been change there, and it just hasn't been a seamless transition. And they've had some issues in the secondary, and they gave up 400 passing yards on Sunday to Washington, and they needed to outscore the Commanders, and they did. So, like you said, they're figuring it out almost like as they go, but they continue to find a way. And that's what the really, really good teams do. Nobody in the NFL is good enough to win by 20 points every week. You're going to be in tough battles most weeks. And the really good teams figure out ways to win the close ones. And you're right, Philly's doing that.
And I was talking with the CEO of Fans First Sports Network this morning, Ken Wisniewski, and he's an Eagles fan. He goes, "Oh man," he's like, "The Eagles, I don't know." And I was like, "Hey, it's better to win these games than the alternative." And he goes, "Well, you're right there." So.
100%. Ken, I will say this about Ken. He is not a doom and gloom Eagles fan. There are many in my area.
Yeah, like your boy Pez. Doesn't matter. Your boy Pez.
No, it doesn't matter that they're 6-1. They will snatch misery from the jaws of enjoyment.
Victory. All right, let's go to the Miami Dolphins. We spoke about them already and how they seem to always beat the mediocre to bad teams and yet really struggle with those tough opponents. Tyreek Hill became the fastest player in league history to go over 1,000 receiving yards in a season. And A.J. Brown, the freak of all freaks that I just mentioned for the Philadelphia Eagles, became the first player in league history to have 125 yards or more receiving in 6 straight games. That is absurd. If you could build an offense around one of these players, which would it be? Coach, you go first.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on this question. And first of all, it is remarkable that an NFL player in today's age, with as good as the defensive coordinators are, can amass 125 plus receiving yards in 6 straight weeks. Washington stubbornly refused to double team him on Sunday, and he just he was almost insulted by it. You could see his body language is like, really, you're just gonna cover me with that guy. I as great as Hill is, I think he benefits tremendously from the system that he's in, and yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit old school at heart when it comes to offense. I really do believe that at the end of the day, you're going to need to be able to play power football when it matters most. To win in the playoffs, you got to be able to run the ball. And what Miami does is remarkable, and it's so much fun to watch. I just don't believe right now that it will hold up over the course of a season, especially against the elite teams. So give me A.J. Brown because of his physicality, the fact that it will always, as long as he's healthy, it will always require more than one guy to account for him. And he will just be a really, really difficult guy to take out of a game. And he can play in any circumstance. He can play in hot weather. He can play in cold weather. He can play when it's windy. Guys who are physical like that seem to transcend some of the circumstances that can limit smaller, speedier guys. So I would take Brown. Who would you take?
So let me first say, I don't think there's a wrong answer here. I mean, these guys are elite level players. They are the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme. But I'll quote one Thomas Cruise from the poet Thomas Cruise. I've got a need for speed. And in today's NFL, in Tyreek Hill, what he can do with the football in his hands at any time. You need a spark? Put him back at punt return. He gets the ball in his hands, he could be gone. Jet sweep, doesn't matter. He could be gone. You want to double him? Like you mentioned, A.J. Brown kind of took offense to the fact that the Commanders didn't double him. Yeah, he can run through all of it. So while I totally understand your reasoning behind A.J. Brown, give me Tyreek Hill. The guy is the human joystick for a reason. He is so ridiculously fast. All you need is a quarterback to be able to put it out there far enough for him to run underneath it, and he will make defenders look silly. The speed of the game is only going to ramp up. You see the linemen are getting faster. You see the everything. Everyone is getting faster and leaner, and it's just the game is changing so much. I feel like the Tyreek Hill is the guy that I would want to build an offense around because, like I said, you cannot teach that type of speed. That is insane. So I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill.
There's no doubt that that's the direction that the game is headed. Let me let me ask you a slightly different question. Which one of those guys would you rather try to tackle in the open field, Tyreek Hill or A.J. Brown? Would you rather have Tyreek Hill embarrass you with his quickness or A.J. Brown potentially put you in the hospital by running over you?
I would always rather whiff than get absolutely abused.
Smart choice.
Let me dive at his ankles and he runs around me and hey, at least I attempted it. In other words, like I remember in my 6th grade year doing the Oklahoma drill and getting absolutely trucked by a bigger kid than me. And it was just the most demoralizing thing ever. So I will never, ever in my life say that I would take an A.J. Brown trucking me over Tyreek Hill, making me look foolish. And, hey, you can pick up your jock strap at the counter when you're done. What about you? You were a safety, a linebacker hybrid type guy in college. What would you rather have?
I mean, I have been trucked by by some people in my day, and it's not enjoyable, not even a little bit. So the speed part though is a helpless feeling, and that's I think one of the reasons why Miami, when they start putting it on teams, can really run away from people. They demoralize their opponents because the speed makes you feel helpless against the bigger teams. You still feel as though, you're taught to be physical and you still feel as though you can tackle them. And it just becomes a matter of will. Do you want to continue to tackle those big guys? But at least you feel like you can make contact. And if you make contact, you can get them on the ground. But with those speed guys, and you're just whiffing,
Yeah.
you just want to go home. You just want to be like, I'm not even going to try anymore.
I don't care what sport you're playing. If it's a team sport and a sport where you're going one-on-one, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's basketball, it doesn't matter. Everyone's had those plays where you did everything that you could. Like, you didn't mess up. You didn't trip. You didn't stumble. You didn't have the wrong footing. You did everything that you could, and it still wasn't good enough. That's what it feels like when you go up against those speedsters. And even A.J. Brown. Go back to last year when Pittsburgh went to Philly. Remember him laughing in the face of defenders as they were on the ground? They were in good position. They just could not stop him. They just couldn't stop him. Hey, while we're on this topic of wide receivers, because these guys are putting up some incredible numbers, and this is a homer question for two Steeler fans, Antonio Brown in his prime, where does he rank for you in terms of the best wide receivers that maybe you've seen do it in this era? We'll put it that way.
In probably in his prime, in maybe the 20 to 15 to 20 to 18 range, yeah. I think he was unquestionably the best receiver in the league. And the combination of he and Ben Roethlisberger together was just so magical that it's hard to duplicate. Like, as good as Tyreek Hill is, I mean, I think Tua is a very good quarterback, but clearly he's not Ben Roethlisberger. And I think Jalen Hurts is a great quarterback, but in terms of his understanding of defenses and he's probably like at a master's level of playing quarterback, but when Ben or Antonio Brown was in his prime, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger was at the doctorate level, So
yeah,
it'll be really, those two guys just were really on the same level at the same time, and it's hard to separate them for me. So, I mean, I would have to really think about some other names who may have compared to Antonio Brown, but as far as being able to just beat a defense with pretty much whatever they threw at you, those two guys were remarkable for sure.
Some of the best I've ever seen, and I know I'm a homer. I openly admit that, but still, like, people that don't know, like young kids that only know Antonio Brown for being this psychopath on social media and stuff, he was a hell of a receiver before that. All right, let's move on. Let's go to backup quarterbacks. Who doesn't like talking about backup quarterbacks? I mean, my gosh, Coach, you listed them out. This past Sunday, we had Brett Rippon, Tommy DeVito. Who the hell is that? I don't even know. Taylor Heineke, Mitchell Trubisky, Tyrod Taylor, Tyson Bagent, Will Levis, Zach Wilson, and PJ Walker all played due to injuries to the players ahead of them on the initial depth chart. Incompetence from the team's respective starters does also come into play here as well. Was there anything that you like or takeaways from any of those players?
Well, first of all, this is going to segue into a conversation about officiating, and you're going to be so excited because I know you love talking about officiating. Was there anything to be excited? I mean, Will Levis had a great debut, right? He threw 4 touchdown passes in his starting debut. You can't get overly excited about that because there have been, I don't want to say plenty of quarterbacks, but he's not the first quarterback to have a great first game, and then the defense coordinators get a hold of some film and they really start to go to work on you, and you quickly see them kind of regress. But so you gotta wait and see what happens with Levis. He'll play the Steelers on Thursday night, and that's a short turnaround, and he won't have a lot of time to prepare. So the jury's out on him. All those other guys are, and this is really sort of my segue into officiating. All of those other guys are the NFL's worst nightmare because the NFL does not want those guys playing quarterback. And the injuries, whether those injuries are just sort of freaky, unfortunate things like the Kirk Cousins injury in Minnesota, or the product of like legit hits. The Kenny Pickett injury, that's roughing the passer. That was a roughing the passer. I don't think there's any question about it. And the NFL has got to be kicking itself when they've gone to great lengths to try to protect quarterbacks, to make the rules almost impossible on defenders. And yet you still have this many starters out. So I don't know how much further can they go as far as the rules go. I don't think that they can. I just feel as though with this many backups playing, the league is really kicking itself.
It's not about the rule anymore. It's about the implementation of the rule. And I'm not going to get started on this rant because you don't want me to get started on this rant. But let's go through this list. So Brett Rippon, who is he playing for?
I just drew a blank on it.
What team is that? That's
That is a
not
great
Indy, is
question.
it?
It
Is
is
it
not.
Indy?
No, he's
Because that's
not in Indy.
Minshew.
Is he Minnesota's backup? No, I
I
don't
don't know
even
who the
know
hell's
who.
Tommy DeVito. Are you making up
Tommy
names here,
DeVito is the
Coach?
Giants' backup. He is the backup. The backup to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones feels like he should be the backup to somebody, and Tommy
Okay.
DeVito is his backup.
All right. So Tyrod Taylor, we're talking ribs. Tyler Henneke is in Atlanta. Was he inserted just Desmond Ritter was
Yeah,
awful, and so they put him in
yeah.
the game? Okay, so
Yep,
that's
they
poor
pulled
play.
Ritter. Yep.
Tyson
Um,
Bagent is in there because Justin Fields with his thumb. Will Levis is in there because of Ryan Tannehill's high ankle sprain. Zach Wilson, we know, is an injury to Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tendon. PJ Walker is in there on Cleveland because of Deshaun Watson's shoulder. So the weird thing, and this is, yeah, the NFL wants its marquee players in there. You can't do anything about half of the injuries I just named. Like, you can't help that Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers were planting their back foot and their Achilles tendon just snaps. It just that you can't do anything about it. You could put in every rule in the book and it's not going to protect the quarterback in all circumstances. I think the bigger question here is, Coach, and maybe this is where we should go with this backup quarterback talk, is how bad is the quarterback play in the league that all these starting quarterbacks are going down? And I'm saying, who the hell is this guy? Because I don't even know his name. And does that say more to college football now than it does with these quarterbacks coming in that are not pro ready and are not built for NFL systems? That's to me a really honest to goodness question, because when I look at these players, yeah, there are some career backups like Tyrod Taylor, Taylor Henneke, Mitch Trubisky now, but other than that, like, these young guys they're just not it. It's very hit or miss. What are your thoughts?
yeah, no, that's a great question. I'll give you three quick answers. One, yes, college systems are partly responsible. The air raid stuff is all the rage in college, and so there's a lot of colleges that run mirrored systems where guys are running the same route concepts on both sides of the field, and they're only taught to read half the field, and then they get to the NFL, and you got a lot of coordinators running full field read concepts. So they're not really taught to read the game the way that they're taught to in the NFL. Then the second factor is a lot of these guys get up to the NFL and they're thrown in immediately, right? You think about Mitch Trubisky, who had a miserable rookie season with the Bears, thrown into the starting lineup when he clearly wasn't prepared. You think about like a Malik Willis in Tennessee, even some of the Zach Wilson with the Jets. I mean, these guys were not ready to play, and they weren't given the luxury of being able to sit around for a few years because of the pressure that's on them to insert these young quarterbacks into the lineup quickly, get an evaluation, and make a decision as to whether or not you have to move on. But the third thing is something I was talking about on my Call Sheet podcast last week, is that the defensive coordinators I think in the never-ending kind of cat and mouse game between DCs and OCs, they've made the last big move. And that big move has just been coverage disguise. The coverage disguises in the league right now are remarkable. It's almost impossible. Like if you pause your television when they show a play pre-snap and you just look at the defense and you say to yourself, all right, what coverage are they in? It's almost impossible to tell, because when the moment that ball is snapped, the coverage is going to change. They're
Yeah.
they're going from 2 to 3 and 3 to 2 and playing split field coverages, and it's just, you got to be so good in your film studies as a quarterback to be able to get an idea about what a defense is doing. And we're seeing Kenny Pickett struggle with that in Pittsburgh. He just his eyes are all over the place. The Steelers had a play on Sunday where they had Deontay Johnson open at the goal line for a touchdown. Pickett missed them. And the problem was his pre-snap diagnosis was wrong. He looked to the 3 receiver side first and got fooled. He thought he had 2 on 3 to the 3 receiver side. He ended up having 4 on 3. The post-snap rotation was so good that his eyes went into the coverage, and by the time he came back to the other side, it was too late. So I think the DCs right now are ahead of the OCs. And until the offensive coordinators figure out how to get their quarterbacks trained right, you're going to see a lot of bad quarterback play.
Yeah, maybe that's the talking point outside of the officiating, which I'm not going to get into that. But maybe this is the biggest talking point, is that you talk about points and scoring being down. Maybe the quarterback play is just really bad. And maybe that's because these injuries to these marquee players are having these young guys like a Tyler Bajan from Shepherd University, which, God, I love my alma mater. I met my wife there, but still, like a Division II quarterback starting on Sunday Night Football against the Chargers. What is that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me, but still, I get it. And so that'll be something to watch and gauge as we go throughout the season. Let's go to the last talking point here. There's some big time matchups coming up on tap in week 9. I know I'm excited for a lot of these games with the Steelers playing on Thursday night, not one of the marquee matchups, by the way, with them playing on Thursday night. I'm excited to get to watch some of these games in their entirety. In your opinion, Coach, you said Philly, Dallas, Miami, Kansas City, which is going to be a 9:30 start because it's in Frankfurt, Germany, and then Buffalo, Cincinnati on Sunday night. Which game of those 3 is the most intriguing to you?
So, all right. So quick comment about the Miami game in Germany. I was in Germany this summer. We went to Italy and Germany, and I had watched the 2 games from Germany last year, and I was blown away by the German fans. And we found ourselves talking to our tour guide about American football in Germany, and she was saying that it's one of the most exciting things to the German fans because of the hitting. They love the hitting, and then they combine the enthusiasm of the soccer crowds with the singing and the dancing and the bands and all that stuff. So a marquee game like Miami, Kansas City in that environment is going to be must watch television. I think that game will be phenomenal from an environmental standpoint. On the field, Philly, Dallas is going to be great. That's going to be a great game because 2 division rivals that can't stand each other. The Eagles being right now maybe the best team in the league. The Cowboys coming off just an absolute trouncing of the Rams. And that game, I think the players will be hyped up for. So those are the 2 I'm really looking forward to.
The Kansas City game with Patrick Mahomes not feeling well, had like a stomach bug. You had to wonder they got to travel overseas. Like, how's that going to impact them? That's intriguing. But this Buffalo Cincinnati game on Sunday night, you talk about playoff implications when you talk about the head-to-head matchup in between these 2 AFC frontrunners. You're talking about these matchups, especially in AFC. The NFC East is going to take care of itself with Philly and Dallas, but these AFC matchups, the head-to-head tiebreakers are massive. I mean, you're talking about Miami and Kansas City and Buffalo and Cincinnati. Those are 4 teams that you're thinking are going to be vying for very interesting seedings in the AFC. So the Buffalo team, very inconsistent. Cincinnati comes off their bye, does their job, actually looks really good against San Francisco. I'm excited for that game as much as I am the other 2, but I'm really excited for all 3, to be honest with you. I don't think there's any way that I could pick. It's going to be great in terms of a viewing standpoint. You got Miami, Kansas City early on Sunday. Then you have Philly, Dallas. I think that's a 4:25 window game. And then you've got Buffalo and Cincinnati and Sunday night. It's going to be a hell of a day of football if you like to just sit there and veg out. So,
oh yeah, the NFL, like, man, they knocked it out of the park with their scheduling on that one for sure.
Absolutely. Let's finish this up like we always do with the player profile. You want to talk about Roquan Smith? Go ahead.
You don't want to weigh in on this one? This is not, come on, you're a Maryland guy. This is the Ravens, man. Let's go.
Roquan Smith is entering like Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs territory with me and the Ravens. So no, I don't want to weigh in on Roquan Smith, but you do, so go ahead.
Well, I'm trying not to let our Steeler bias influence the podcast here. And we're supposed to be talking about the entire league. And I read a stat the other day that really kind of blew me away. So Roquan Smith has now played 17 games with the Ravens. That's a full season's worth of games. Baltimore's gone 12-5 over that stretch. But the thing that's most remarkable about it is that when they acquired Roquan Smith, the Ravens were 27th in DVOA on defense, which I think is one of the most useful statistics, which is, DVOA measures the expected results of plays or games or situations based upon opponent and circumstances, et cetera. In essence, it's measuring how well you should be doing when you factor in your opponents and the circumstances of the play as opposed to just sort of raw yardage and things like that, which can be very misleading. Anyway, when the Ravens acquired Roquan Smith, they were 27th in the NFL in DVOA. And in the 17 games since, they are first. That is a remarkable jump, man. I mean, when you talk about the impact of a single player on a team, for the Ravens to sort of have made that jump just is a tribute to not only the way in which he has been as an on-field player. I mean, he's a sideline to sideline linebacker, and you pair him with Patrick Queen, and it's like, oh my gosh. That was my first thought when the Ravens acquired him. I was just like, oh God, those two together are going to haunt the Steelers. But his leadership has been phenomenal as well. So Baltimore, I think, is scary good. And I think that they've got a chance to make a lot of noise. And I think that he was kind of the piece that they needed to get him into that range.
You know, the funny thing is I agree with everything you said. He is a hell of a player. He was worth the trade that they made and everything they gave up to get him when he was unhappy in Chicago. Smart man, wanted out of there before it got really, really bad. Nonetheless, Baltimore, yeah, scary good team. You know, it comes down to a player that's not named Roquan Smith. It comes down to Lamar Jackson's health. Can he stay healthy? Because you've seen even the greatest defenses, you're not going to win much when you're trotting out backup quarterback. Oh gosh, what's his name? I can't even think of it. He played the Steelers like two times last year, I think. I'll think of it. Anyways, he's not Lamar Jackson. We'll put it that way. But Roquan Smith is, I feel like he's the last of a dying breed. Do you agree with that? Like kind of like that downhill physical. He kind of reminds me of Ray Lewis, to be honest, when I watch him play. You think that that's kind of a dying breed, that inside linebacker type?
That's a good question. I think that Roquan Smith is athletic enough to remain a 3-down backer, but the true downhill thumpers like the Landon Roberts style backer in Pittsburgh, yeah, they're absolutely. I don't know if they're a dying breed. I think there'll always be a role for them, but they're limited now, and the game has exposed them. But you never know, man. It could change back, right? Offenses stretched everything out and made guys like that, guys that you got to get a guy like that off the field because of the speed, the horizontal speed. And then defenses started putting nickel defenders on the field. And now a lot of offenses are going back to 2 tight end formation. So, maybe it'll contract again and we'll see in 3 or 4 years down the road, those linebackers come back in vogue.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why Roquan Smith is so good is he can do both. Yep. He can come downhill. He can make the tackles. He can cover. He's actually a very good coverage linebacker. And, I think back to the Steelers, they thought they had that guy in Ryan Shazier before his injury in 2017. Haven't been able to fill that spot since. But I think that's kind of where they're going because when you think about a Landon Roberts, that style of downhill thumper, not great in coverage, they're a liability and as a potential mismatch for the opposition. So they get stuck on the field, and what do? Isolate that guy, and we're going to throw it right to him. I'll never forget for the rest of my life trying to watch John Bostic cover Keenan Allen against the Chargers, and I wanted to throw up. I wanted to puke or just throw something against the wall because he's a liability. That's what happens with some of these teams. But like you said, that's good offensive coaching. That's good awareness on their part. Roquan Smith. You got to bring up
NFL's a matchup league, man. And if you get a guy who is versatile enough to be able to employ in a bunch of different situations and you don't have to sub him out, you're right. That is a hugely valuable piece. And if you get multiple guys like that, then, you're building yourself something special.
All right. We've talked too positively about the Ravens, so why don't we end the show on that? All right, Coach. Hey, tell everyone what's coming up on the Call Sheet podcast and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, at K.T. Smith, FFSN. On the Call Sheet. Boy, I feel terrible, man. Last week we had Dave Stefano of First and Skull, which is still one of my favorite names for a platform there on. And he was just like raving about the Vikings. And he was so excited about them. And then Kirk Cousins blows his Achilles out. So maybe I shouldn't have any. Maybe I'll have a Ravens guest on this week.
Yes, please do.
No, man, we're talking about the unpredictable nature of this year and trying to figure out why. What are some of the reasons why the league has been so unpredictable this year? Looking at why teams are so inconsistent on a week-to-week basis and trying to make a little bit of sense of what we're seeing. It's really a unique season, and it's sort of shaping up to be a fascinating one because you just don't know what's going to happen, and I think that makes intriguing football.
Yeah, where can they find you on social media?
At KT Smith FFSN on X or Twitter or whatever it is.
Whatever
I can't call it X.
Hey, if you run into your buddy Pez, the dude's picks this week were just rough.
I'm telling you, man, that actually ties into my conversation, right? Like, how would you like to try to be picking these games right now in the league, the way that the nature of the league right now?
Well, I'm going to ask Pez about that. So if you want to listen to that, go find his own. He has his own flipping podcast feed, Pez's Picks. Just search Pez's Picks wherever you get your podcast. We're going to be talking to Pez. We'll have that on Thursday morning, so make sure you check that out. You can find me and my Steelers work as well as Kevin's work on the Steel Curtain Network. You can find us steelcurtainnetwork.com as well as wherever you get your podcast by searching Steelers or Steel Curtain Network. You'll hear my Let's Ride podcast is Here We Go Steelers show with Brian Davis. And you can find me on Twitter at jhartman, HARTMAN _PIT. Coach, as always, thanks for your time. We'll talk to you next week.